Title: The Countdown of Souls, April 2000, Spain. Deep in the heart of the rugged Spanish countryside lies the forgotten village of Valverde, nestled between craggy hills and ancient forests. The village is known for its eerie silence, shrouded in mystery, untouched by time or the reach of modern civilization. The few remaining residents live simple lives, cut off from the world. However, beneath the quiet surface, something dark has stirred for centuries. For as long as anyone could remember, a legend haunted Valverde, a tale of ancient rites, buried beneath the weight of forgotten rituals and superstition. Every 100 years, it is said, a ceremony must be performed to open a doorway, one that leads not just to death, but to something much worse. Demons waiting on the other side could be summoned by the blood of the innocent. 5 victims would ensure their emergence, pulling the veil between worlds wide open. As the year 2000 approached, strange things began to happen. Livestock died inexplicably, their bodies mutilated in ways too disturbing for words. Children disappeared in the night, never to be found, and the wind carried whispers, voices speaking a language no one could understand. But it was the countdown that terrified those few who still lived in Valverde. Every day, without fail, the village church bells rang, despite the fact that the church had been abandoned for over a century. 5 days before the end. It began on the night of April 25th. The church bells rang 5 times, their deep, somber toll echoing through the empty streets. Marta, a young woman of 22, had stayed behind in Valverde when most of her family fled to the city. She refused to leave her grandmother, Doña Clara, the oldest resident of the village. That night, Marta was sitting by the fire in their small stone house when she felt a chill wash over her, the flames sputtering despite the lack of wind. The bells rang, and then the house grew cold. Her grandmother, who had been silent for days, suddenly whispered, "They've started." Marta asked, "Who? Abuela? What's happening?" "The demons. The countdown begins with 5. They need 5 lives, 5 souls, and they'll stop at nothing." Before Marta could ask more, a knock came at the door. Fear froze her in place. Slowly she opened it to find Father Miguel, the village priest, his eyes wide and vacant. "It's time," he said simply, "for the first." That night, under a blood-red moon, Father Miguel took his own life in the village square. His death marked the first of 5, the beginning of the end. Days before the end. The next night, as the church bells rang 4 times, the village descended further into madness. Marta began to have vivid nightmares, dreams of dark figures standing in her room whispering her name. She woke each night drenched in sweat, the whispers growing louder and louder until she could almost understand them. Almost. The morning of April 26th, news spread that Tomas, a local farmer, had disappeared. His wife found his body at the edge of the forest, his chest carved with strange symbols that no one could decipher. Tomas had been the second. The countdown was moving faster now. Doña Clara sat by the fire, staring into the flames. "They need 4 now," she murmured. 4 souls before the door opens. The demons will come, child. They will come, and we can't stop it." Marta couldn't take it anymore. She ran to the church, desperate to find answers. But the old building was as cold and lifeless as ever. Inside, she found an ancient book, covered in dust. It was filled with drawings of strange creatures, rituals, and blood sacrifices. One passage caught her eye, a prophecy that spoke of a cursed village and a ritual of 5. Each sacrifice brought the demons closer. 5 would open the door. 4 would prepare the way. 3 days before the end. By the 3rd day, the village was in complete disarray. As the bells rang 3 times that night, another villager was claimed. This time it was Emilio, a fisherman. His boat was found drifting on the river, his body hanging by a thread from the mast. But this wasn't suicide. Marta knew that much. Emilio had been taken, his life claimed for the ritual. Marta, shaken by the growing number of deaths, turned to her grandmother. "How do we stop this?" Doña Clara shook her head, her eyes vacant and distant. "You can't stop what's been in motion for centuries. The village is cursed. We are the chosen place where the end begins. 3 more deaths, Marta, and the door will open." Desperate, Marta searched the book again, but there was no mention of how to stop the ritual, only how it must proceed. The countdown was irreversible. 2 days before the end. The bells rang twice on April 28th. Now only 2 lives remained to be taken. and Marta could feel the presence of the demons growing stronger. The air was heavy with the smell of decay, and the village seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. She knew it was only a matter of time before she or her grandmother would be next. That evening, she heard a scream from the village square. Running to the source, she found Miguel, the butcher, standing over the body of his own son. His eyes were wild, his hands covered in blood. "They made me do it," he whispered. "I couldn't stop them." Marta backed away, horrified. The demons weren't just taking lives, they were controlling people, forcing them to kill their own. 2 lives now. 2 left, and the door would open.
Uh,
One day before the end. The final bell rang the next night, only once. One soul remained. By this time, Valverde was barely a village. Most had fled, while those who stayed lived in constant fear. Marta had barricaded herself in the house with her grandmother, but the whispers had returned, louder now. They filled her mind, urging her to surrender, to give in. As the day dragged on, Marta began to feel her will slipping. The book lay open on the table, its pages taunting her with the inevitability of the countdown. One soul left. She knew it would come for her or for her grandmother. There was no escape. Night fell, and the final bell rang. The door was ready to be opened, but it needed one more sacrifice. In the final sacrifice, in the dead of night, Marta felt something cold and sharp press against her chest. She awoke to see her grandmother standing over her, a knife in hand, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I'm sorry, Marta," Doña Clara whispered. "I have to do this. One more, and the demons will rise." But before the knife could fall, Marta fought back. In the struggle, the blade turned, and Doña Clara fell to the floor, the life draining from her eyes. The countdown was complete. 5 lives taken. The door opened. Outside, the wind howled as something ancient and dark stirred in the hills. The earth trembled, and Marta knew with every fiber of her being that Valverde was lost. The demons had arrived, and the world would never be the same again.